Well, last week we posted the first of a series of videos to our Facebook and YouTube page that are designed to help couples during this period of time that we're all sheltering in place during this concentrated period of time over the course of the next, I don't know, how long, much longer is it going to be? We don't know, 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever it's going to be. We just want to help you work on your marriage during that period of time. And last week, in the first video, we talked about, well, why does marriage take so much hard work? And you may recall that we said that as it relates to marriages or relationships in general, we're not operating on a level playing field. Christian theology gives us some insight into relationships that many people don't understand. And here's what we said. That relationships, a marriage, sort of like, I pictured it like this. A rock on the side of a hill. Let's say that represents your marriage. And let's say this is where you don't want your marriage to be, and this is where you do want your marriage to be. We said that just like there are forces working against a rock, it moves the rock down to the bottom of the hill, so Christian theology tells us sin is always working against our marriages. And not just marriages, any relationships. That's why the New Testament is so full of commands to be unified, to be harmonious, because sin is naturally working against that. Well, what I want to do over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks is I want to give you some things that you can do to resist the force of sin that is working against your marriage. And the first one I want to talk about today is intentional intimacy. Intentional intimacy. And I want to give you 2 things that you can do to be intentional about intimacy in your marriage. The first is to cultivate a culture of fondness and admiration in your marriage. If you want to develop intimacy, if you want to be an intimate couple, if you want to be intentional about that, you've got to cultivate a culture of fondness and admiration in your marriage. In fact, the premier research institute on marriage in the world, the Gottman Institute, has found that happy couples, listen to this, have 20 times more positive interactions with one another than negative. Let me ask you something. Does your spouse know that you like him or that you like her? There's this period of time when you first begin a relationship, like when you're dating, and you remember this, and it's like that period of time when everything is great about the other person. Like everything they do is so sweet, it's so cute. Well, that period of time is called limerence. There's a name for that. It's called limerence, and that wears off after a certain amount of time. I don't know how long, 6 months, maybe a year into a dating relationship. And over time, what happens in marriage in particular is it gets very easy to start focusing on the things that you don't like about your spouse. And look, let's face it, with any spouse, there's plenty not to like about them. We're all, the Bible says, sinners. And so it's easy for a sense of cynicism and criticism to creep into your relationship. And when that happens, resentment begins to build in a relationship, and then following resentment is contempt for one another. This doesn't come naturally. You have to work against the force of sin, working against your marriage, and working against a culture of fondness and admiration. So here's what I'd like to challenge you to do. I'd like to challenge you to say something 5 times a day, something positive about your spouse, something that you like about them, something that tells them that you like them and that you love them, but something that you like about them. Like maybe it has to do with their character. Maybe it's something about the way they look. Maybe it's a role that they play. Maybe it's the kind of father or mother that they are. It could be any number of things. I'd like to challenge you 5 times a day to come up with something positive that you tell your spouse in some way, shape, or form. It could be a text, it could be a note on a mirror, it could be a note on a pillow, it could be just something straightforward, one-on-one. 5 times a day, find something that you like about your spouse. Cultivate a culture of fondness and admiration. And the second thing that you can do to be intentional about intimacy in your marriage, besides cultivating a culture of fondness and admiration, is to turn towards one another's emotional bids. Now, what's an emotional bid? Well, it's any attempt that your spouse makes for attention or for affection. The Gottman Institute has found that happy couples turn towards one another's emotional bids 20 times more than unhappy couples. Now, we've attached a link with a list of the kinds of things that are emotional bids from the Gottman Institute. But they could be anything. They could be things like, a spouse says, come sit with me, or let's talk, let's play a game, watch this Netflix show with me. Could be any number of things that are emotional bids for attention or affection. Couples that are happy tend to move toward one another 20 times more than unhappy couples. Let me ask you a question. Do you know how your spouse makes emotional bid. Learning those and responding to those will go a long way towards developing intimacy in your marriage. Develop intimacy, be intentional about intimacy by creating a culture of fondness and admiration and turning towards one another's emotional bids.